I would like to introduce our next speaker, and that will be no other but Mr. Matthew Jochym. Mr. Jochym is not new in the cybersecurity world industry. He actually has been doing conferences for the past 18 years now. He actually has a lot of experience in speaking publicly. He actually likes the fact that, people shouldn't spend, much on cybersecurity, take the easy way path. So he's here to talk to us, and he's also going to tell us about how he would like to keep logging more practical. He thinks that practicality is something which is very important. So please join me to welcome Mr. Matthew Jochym.
All righty, okay, good. Is this the right mic height? Can you guys hear me? Good. All right, so what we're here to talk about today. The objective of this session for the next, probably 45 minutes or so is to really give you a primer to set up a data program. I don't really care who you are. You can either be a college student, you could work at a Fortune 100 company, or small, medium. The things I'm going to talk about today, you all can use at your, wherever you are. We'll also give you some options for a software. Just like the introduction said, I've been doing conferences for a very long time. Nothing drives me more crazy when someone says, I need to go drop a 7-figure bill on some product to do what they need, what they're talking about. No. We'll have plenty of free options, open source options, and obviously if you want to go buy the enterprise support and plan all that kind of crap, you have that too. Like I mentioned, you can walk out of this session doing everything I'm talking about today for free or low cost. Today, I'm going to blend the world of home and work. Still, it's all data. Data we can do, it's all data, and the stuff that you do at home, you directly can translate over to work, those techniques, and then even that kind of storytelling. When you're working with data, you're basically telling a story. So those kind of concepts we can put at either place. Who am I? I'm the global head of cyber observability for BlackRock. Been doing this data world since 2006 when I was an intern. Reside over in North Wilmington, and that's it. Like I said, there's data everywhere. There's tons of data even flowing through this room right now that we're generating nonstop. What are some of those types of data? Again, we're going to blend that world between home and work. So start with easy stuff, behavioral and transaction. I don't know how many of you know, you can go to Amazon.com right now, go to your profile, and download all your Amazon transactions forever. It's a little scary. I can go back to 2002 and see what I bought back when I was in high school. But you can start doing analytics on your Amazon purchases. Can also be dangerous at the same time, but you get the idea. For those of you who use Facebook, you can go and actually go on Facebook. You can download everything you've ever done on Facebook. Every message, every post, every like, every picture. And you can do as much to your heart's content. Facebook will give you a nice, big, giant zip file. You go, load that up into your analytical platform of choice. We'll give you guys a few options later today. Start doing word clouds. What are some of the top words that you've mentioned? What are the top people that you've talked to? And that kind of stuff. Credit card purchases. Go take a dump from your American Express, your MasterCard, your Visa, your Barclays, whatever. Perfect use case, and I guarantee you we are all guilty of this, is those phantom monthly credit card bills monthly credit card charges that none of you guys even realize it's even happening. You sign up for some subscription, $5 a month, it's great. It's probably been going on for the last 2 years, and you just don't know it. So taking all your credit card purchases into an analytical platform and start doing, hey, did that purchase, that's reoccurring every day, the same month. I've just dumped $100 into a service I never used. Health data, another type of data everywhere. You're talking about medical records, health surveys, fitness trackers. I'm a big skier, I'm a big bike rider, so things like Strava, Apple Watch, Garmin. I can go on for probably an hour talking about this stuff. Even look at your GPS data, putting that into a platform and plotting all your tracks. Switching, let's go into a few more examples, more on use cases, and then we'll get to more of like how you actually do this stuff. and some stuff that you can use is talking about audio and video data. I use Spotify. I've been using Spotify for a very long time. You actually can hook up Spotify to services that actually will track what you listen to. So what's your top song for 2024? What was your top artist for 2024? Interesting data points there that you can help kind of learn those techniques, learn that storytelling, so when you can do stuff at home or take it to your office, all those kind of things all kind of just blend together. My personal favorite, which is sensor data. So I'm a big home smart guy. I could talk for hours on end about smart home stuff. But if you think about the amount of data your home generates, I don't know how many of you guys have like a Nest smart thermostat or Ecobee or whoever tracking when your thermostat goes on and off. Looking at energy monitoring. True story, a couple years ago, I have a crawl space. My crawl space dehumidifier line froze outside. The thing ran for 2 days straight, and I didn't know until I checked my alerts. Oh, and actually the dehumidifier almost actually spilled over with the water into my crawl space. If I didn't have energy monitoring, I would never know that would happen. Water monitoring, also very important. Pipes leak, happens all the time. So getting that kind of monitoring. Fridge monitoring, and then home internet traffic. Again, your Rokus and your other stuff can talk a lot. Now we're sort of getting a little more into the corporate world, but again, this is still also getting very, very relevant at home. We all have Windows laptops, we all have Mac laptops, workstations, blah, blah, blah. Look at your endpoint data. So again, these are free, this is some free stuff that you actually can do. So things like Sysmon. Looking at your Windows endpoint for Sysmon. What kind of processes are you running? What kind of network traffic? Windows Event Collector. This is a free way, agentless, to get Windows event logs off workstations en masse into a centralized system, agentless. I don't know too many desktop engineering teams that actually like putting more agents on laptops. So right here, you're using native Windows services to get logs off. Using typical Unix syslog, ng, you can get varlog secure, varlog messages, that authentication data, system level metric. Two kind of free-ish type of stacks to do more EDR style, which is UTM and Waza. You can go download those for home, Docker instance, Raspberry Pi, off you go. Authentication data. Believe it or not, you actually can get a free Okta instance. It's not very big, it's a couple users. But it's stuff that you can play around with for free, which is pretty awesome. You can also look at your Windows security data. So again, event code 462425, which is your login, logouts. Unix Secure and OS X. We sort of talked about this on the last one with home internet traffic, but go in here, start talking about network data. So again, we all have network data everywhere. Home routers, home networks, corporate routers, corporate networks. Again, the concepts still apply from here to there and back and forth. So again, these are free things that you can go play with at home. So I don't know how much you guys know Corelight. Also, there's the enterprise solution. You can also get it at home. If you have a Raspberry Pi, they have a very easy script, slap it on, off you go. Bro, Zeek, names changed. Splunk Stream, there's obviously options using NetFlow if your devices support it, but either using Apache NiFi or Cribble. And then lastly, open source, just good old American pfSense. Last one, which is again, just now start talking about threat intel data. Again, kind of more into the corporate world here, but threat intel is important. You want to know what's good, what's bad. And again, I'm not a fan of spending a lot of money if I don't have to. There are plenty of free sources out there for threat intel feeds. I think CISA even has one out there. Vulnerability data. Your home network, again, has more things than you think that it does. So even using things like Tenable has an at-home version. Obviously, they have an enterprise version. You can do either or. Alien Vault, OpenVAS, scanning your home network for vulnerabilities, trying to figure out what's out there. All right, so those are the types of data sets that we have out there. There's plenty. So now we have the data. Now we got to put it somewhere. We got to do something with it. We got to tell a story. I'm a big fan of that. When when you're working with data, you're basically telling a story. So we have five layers: orchestration, extraction, storage, analytics, and visualization. We'll kind of group the last two together, and we'll kind of group the first two together, and the middle one's kind of its own little world. So orchestration and extraction, this is really your foundation, where you're going to start bringing this data in. Now, it's not as simple as people want to think, just, oh, I'm just going to bring in this data, and it's going to be great, it's going to be awesome. No, it's not that easy. This is the chance for you to get things right. So a lot of you may think that time is a very simple, easy thing. It's whatever time it is, 10, whatever, in the morning. It's not. You start working with time zones. So you have one system over here in UTC, this other one's over here in India, this one's over US East, US West. Now you got to standardize all those time zones on one format. Systems having time sync, also super important. If you're working in an investigation and there's a time drift of 10, 15 minutes on this server and you're trying to track back a timeline, making sure that your time is set is correct. It's also the chance for you to do, the other chance to do enrichments. I have another slide here, and I think it's the next one, where we'll talk about how to enrich things like firewall data to help make your life easier or even make your analyst's life easier. Again, going back to the home world, you can start enriching some of this data. Instead of running that same query over and over again and get a few more to run to provide some context, why don't you just do it all at once? The really neat thing about doing this is you really get to accelerate your vendor POVs and POCs. So it's a lot easier to go to one of these platforms and say, okay, I have this data feed coming into my proxy data, and I'm just going to send it off someplace else. I did it the other day. It took me 5 minutes. Before, it would take me a couple hours. Again, some tools. Again, these are all collection of free open source and enterprise, and some of them are even out there on the floor out there. So everything from Apache NiFi, it's free and open source. Cribble Stream, they're downstairs in the pit next to CrowdStrike. Splunk Edge Processor, more of an enterprise solution. You'd have to have a Splunk Cloud subscription, but they're up on the top deck of the pit. Observo.ai, Tesnier, Vector from Datadog, and FluentBit. These are all various options from open source to free. If you want to go full out and pay for it and get enterprise support and high availability and blah, 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 you can do that. So continuing on this enrichment idea. Again, for here, I'm using firewall logs, but you can use it. You can kind of switch words around and use it for other things too. So we're taking firewall logs. We're taking about 500 gigs in per day, give or take. Now, my SOC analysts, when they need to go in and actually look at a firewall event, nobody knows what an IP is because it's really something else. A 10.1.1.1 to an analyst is just an IP. But in reality, that could be your Active Directory domain controller. That could be some other very sensitive server. By putting the system name actually in the log, so a couple things you're doing there. You're saving the analyst time from having to do that extra step that they may mess up, who knows? You're also marking at that point in time, that IP was that host. Again, IPs change, DHCP, Cloud World, blah, blah, blah. So now we're starting to enrich things to make our analysts' lives easier. We'll go in another slide here, but parsing your logs. So CSV, XML, JSON, there's one more. Making that into a format that actually makes sense. Doing things like IP geolocation. So you may want to know, hey, what country is this thing coming from? You can also start to reduce some of your logs too, save some of that space by summarization. Do you really need 500 gigs of logs of firewall data per day? Probably not. Well, you might. But do you really need to know that one IP talked to that one IP for, I don't know, 10,000 times? Or is it still good to say, okay, that IP talked to that IP, but we're going to add a field that says they talked 1,000 times, have one log message rather than 1,000. Saves you time, saves you money, saves you storage space, saves you license. Lastly, then you can also build it into a nice little prettier log format. I got another slide here in a few that will show you some of the log formats, one I really don't like and some that I really do like. So on the left there, take that 500 gigs of logs, you're reducing 500 gigs down to roughly about 20 gigs by doing the parsing, the summarization, the IP lookup, the reverse lookup, and building into something a little more prettier to read. Again, same exact logs. You're not really losing anything. On the other side, we'll talk about data tiering too, is you may want to put now the raw version, because you have audit, you have compliance, you want to keep that raw logs just for incident response, whatever. Put that someplace else a lot cheaper, and we'll talk more about data tiering here in a little bit. In terms of speed, which is also very important, the raw version of that is 1.3 billion events. Takes roughly 746 seconds, which with my rough math is about 10 or 15 minutes, give or take. With the summarized version, that takes about 1.5 minutes. And there at the bottom, you kind of see the parameters that I use. This was done on my firewall data back at my company. 15-minute window, we group it by action, desk IP, desk port, source IP protocol, and firewall rule name. That's just some real numbers. All right, talking about formats. This is probably my favorite slide that I talk about during this whole thing, and I think it's one of the most underrated aspects of telling stories, having data, blah, 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 is the format. Format to me is everything. So from top to bottom, we'll just kind of talk through it first, and then I'll give some of my feedback. Is first one, you have KV pairs. Something equals something. So field 1 equals AAA, field 2 equals blah, blah, blah. So for those 3 fields, you're about 47 characters, 47 bytes, give or take. Below that, you have your CSV, your TSV, comma, tab, delimited, whatever. Again, for those 3 fields, again, we're not going to say field equals something. We're just going to say value, 26 characters, 26 bytes in other words as well. JSON, my favorite. Again, very readable. Most platforms these days can understand that, 61 bytes, give or take. And then lastly, my least favorite in the world, whoever created this, I have questions for you. XML, 149 characters for what I don't know. So as you see here, picking a format that works for you is important. So what format is good for you? I don't know. In some ways, like I had a very good friend of mine who works for a medium-sized company up in New York, calls me one day. He's like, dude, I reduced my EDR data set by 40% by switching to CSV. I told him it was quite crazy, but we argued back and forth on who was more crazier. And it was true. He reduced his EDR data set by 40%. Now, he chose CSV. That was his format of choice. But in CSV world, though, you don't have the very easily aesthetic way of saying, oh, that equals this equals that. So again, it's a trade-off. Things like CSV and KV pairs, they're nice, but they get a little wonky the more data you get. Try to do KV pairs for 50 some odd KV pairs, good luck. It's an absolute mess. So these numbers by themselves may not mean much, but let's start to scale the whole thing out. So again, these numbers are based on about 28 million events per day, and you start looking at sizes over time. So 1 day of 28 million events of XML, about 3 to 4 gigs, give or take. Over 1 year, you're at 1.4 petabytes. JSON, you're at 1.5 gigs a day. At 1 year, you're at 580. So right then and there, you literally saved a petabyte, capital P, of storage, but you lost 0 visibility in your data. I think it's pretty sweet. Switching over to storage, I'm going to quite simply put pretty straightforward. This is where you store the data. This is where a data tiering strategy comes into play. Now again, for you guys looking at this for like playing at home, is a data tiering strategy nearly as important? Questionable. If you want to pay for AWS out of pocket, you may want to look at that, who knows? This is really more in the bigger implementations, but you have plenty of options here. You have things like Amazon S3 S3 compliant. I'm a big fan of not using AWS because I don't want to pay for it. It's kind of expensive out of my own personal pocket. So using S3 compliant, Azure Storage, GCP, Vultr, etc., blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Splunk Cloud, Splunk Enterprise has the ability to also store the data. Using good old-fashioned server hard disks also work. Using Elasticsearch, again, they have an open source with Elk, or you go buy their full-blown enterprise. Datadog has an option in the storage arena, and then Grafana as well. And there's free, open source, and enterprise. So talking a little bit about storage, probably the biggest thing that I have noticed, I'm starting to hit my vendors on it a little bit more, which is the idea of actual versus provisioned. And what do I mean by that? So if you go to a vendor and you be like, hey, I want to buy a terabyte worth of your data, a terabyte worth of ingest. You throw in 1 gig, you throw in 500 gigs, you throw in a terabyte, you still pay for a terabyte no matter what happens. Versus actuals, if you only put in a gig, you pay for a gig. You put in a terabyte, you pay for a terabyte. The neat part about that one is you think about your typical work week, 5 days a week, you're pretty busy. 2 days of that week, you're pretty quiet. It's the weekend. 52 weeks out of the year, 2 times 2 days, you're about 108 days, give or take. Approximately a little less than 1/3 of your year, you're not going to be using nearly as much data as you think you're going to be using in a more actual-based licensing model. That's that. So, good. So going to data tiering, let's talk about that a little bit more. In my head, there's 3 tiers. Tier 1, which is your premium, it's your top tier. It's the stuff that you're just going to be searching all day, every day. It's going to be driving your monitoring, your SOC alerts, your monitoring team alerts, making sure that your network didn't topple over. You're having alerts for your switches, your routers, your OSs, even knowing when your home dehumidifier is nearly going to boil over from water. Tier 2, which is more of your archival. These are those things that audit's just going to make you keep. Audit's like, hey, you got to go store this data for the next year. And you're like, well, great. I have no place to put it, nor do I want to pay for it. Don't put that in your Tier 1 super awesome disk. Put that someplace else where you just keep it, and the occasional when audit comes on knocking, and they're like, hey, do you have this data? You'd be like, yes, I do. Here you go. And then lastly, Tier 3, sort of my favorite. If you don't have to pay for it, why should you? If it's already there someplace else and you can just do an API call to make access to it, sweet. You don't have to pay for it, but you can still access all the greatness out there. So we'll talk about this more in the visualization layer, but some platforms allow you to make API calls into third parties and actually bring that data in. So if you can do an API call into some other platform, instead of ingesting, I don't know, terabyte, 5 terabytes, whatever, gigs, whatever per day, if you just do an API call into some other platform and bring that data in that way and not have to deal with the cost of bringing that in, it's fantastic. Let's talk about some real numbers. Again, these numbers are a little big, but here's just the example. 1 terabyte per day, your archive tier is 5 gigs, your premium tier is 20 gigs, and you got to keep the data for 1 year. 1 year straight premium for about 7.4 million, again, give or take. For most teams, in my opinion, most 90 to 95, even more percent of your searches are not going to go more than 90 days. Obviously, when stuff hits the fan, you're going to go back more than 90 days. But most of your searches are not going to go that far back. So why don't we keep the first 90 in premium and then keep the rest of that over in archive? 3.7 million, again, give or take. Half the cost, you're just now working that data someplace else. We did it. We've gone from the orchestration. We're storing the data somewhere. Let's go to the visualization layer. This is your single pane of glass. I'm a big believer in single pane of glass. I want everything as much as possible in one dashboard. I think that's the way to go. It keeps people from trying to click around all over the place. Finding software that is easy to develop and use is important. It is 2024. If I didn't mention Gen AI at least once, is this a real presentation? So Gen AI will definitely help you in this arena, ChatGPT, Copilot, so on and so forth. Referencing back to the tier 3 stuff is looking at third-party integrations. I have a couple platforms that I have integrated with, probably 10 to 20 terabytes a day worth of data that I don't want to bring in. I don't want to maintain it. So I'll just do API calls out there. On the visualization layer, there's a bunch of free and enterprise and open source options. Again, back to Splunk, they're up on the top deck of the pit. Cribble, they're on the bottom deck of the pit next to CrowdStrike. They have a search product that you can use, free and enterprise. Elastic, also the enterprise version. There's also Elk. OpenSearch, I think this comes from Apache, I think. Grafana, I mentioned that earlier. Tableau, there's actually a public version, and then there's the full-blown enterprise version. Feel free to use either. Lastly, Python, and then listening this morning to Mr. Ramos from CISA, there's also the logging made easy. That's what it is, LME. You can go to CISA's website, and they have a whole thing there that they can have some ideas for you to do some visualization stuff too. So some examples, this is one I grabbed off the internet, which is some home use cases, trying to make some pretty dashboards. Again, this person here, he's watching his current power usage, his internet traffic, so you might be using like Sense, which is the one you hook off the electrical mains. You can be doing Corelight for your home traffic, and then even doing like home weather stations, doing API calls into that. All right, get a quick time check here. Perfect. All right, so some stuff, again, this is free stuff that you can take back to home, back to your office, back to wherever, to kind of kickstart your journey. SOC Prime, fantastic service. There's an enterprise version, there's also community. Free content that you can use to take back wherever. If you want to start monitoring your home stuff, use SOC Prime. If you want to start monitoring your corporate stuff, use SOC Prime. SOC Prime is also pretty cool too, because they have a converter tool called Uncoder. It's at the bottom there. They have like 30 some odd logging platforms that they convert to and from. Some I've never even heard of, and it gives me it gives you some motivation on a late night to see what else is out there. So SOC Prime is pretty cool. Anvologic, more in the threat detection management and engineering space, but they have a GitHub page. You can feel free to take a peek there. Obviously Splunk again, they're up on the top deck. They have ES content updates, which is Splunk Enterprise Security content updates. Comes out about every couple weeks, give or take. Tableau is pretty cool. Again, you get your visualization of the day. May not be relevant to you at the time, but it gives you some of that inspirational juice to make some pretty sweet dashboards to tell that story, whatever kind of story you're trying to tell. One of my personal favorites, which is information is beautiful, it's going to give you some sample aesthetics and sample layouts to help, again, try to drive those creative juices to make something awesome. Miscellaneous on the bottom, good old Twitter, X, whatever they want to call it now these days, has some great content. Again, it's 2024, so Gen AI, so ChatGPT, Copilot, fantastic. I use Copilot quite a bit to even write my own queries at where I work. 2 podcasts that my coworker recommended to me, which is the Data Engineering Podcast and the Analytics Power Hour. And these are all free things that you can take back to home, back to your office, wherever. Nothing drives me more crazy than going to a presentation and saying, I need to go buy something which costs a lot to do whatever I'm trying to talk about. No, I want you guys to come out of this today and be like, hey, there's some free stuff that I can take back at home, back to my office, back wherever, and play with, and it actually works. So what other tools are out there? I had a few, obviously, on here. Trying to go back a little bit. Obviously, I had a few here for each section, but there's some more out there. So these are a couple screen captures that I grabbed off the internet. This one's from Cribble, back from 2023, talking about the observability market map. So everything from SIEM tools, obviously you have CrowdStrike on the floor with their next generation SIEM. Palo Alto's here as well. I think they're here. I think I saw them on the floor. You have things, you have logging tools, big data, storage, analytics, blah, blah, blah. More on the traditional data science side, more in your Hadoop, your big stores, and that kind of stuff. Here's some tools out there that you can use on that front. Your mileage will vary based on free versus open source versus enterprise. So please take a look. If I have any students in the room, any undergrads, in my opinion, the most powerful email address out there is a .edu email address. So emailing any one of these companies with your .edu, be like, hey, I'm a student. I want to learn. We'll see what they can give you. I don't know. And that's it. Thank you guys for attending. I'm here most of the day. Stop me if you have any questions, anything, and that's all I got.